The earliest reference appears not in legend, but in ledger ink. In the provincial mining office of a long-defunct empire, a brittle register dated to the late 18th century lists daily yields of iron and coal with mechanical precision. Numbers march in columns, signatures repeat. Then, on a single page, the handwriting changes. The script grows cramped, hurried. Margins fill with notes that were never meant to be archived. Bones encountered at depth. At first, the overseers assumed livestock, a buried ox, perhaps, or the fossilized remains of some prehistoric beast. Mines uncovered curiosities all the time, teeth like scythes. Shells embedded in stone far from the sea. The earth had its own memory, and miners were used to disturbing it. But the measurements did not make sense. A femur recorded as longer than 2 men laid end to end. A knee joint so wide a child could sit inside it. Ribs described not as curved, but arched like bridges, the journal notes, spanning gaps in the rock rather than resting within it. The language grows strained, as if the writer lacked words large enough for what he was seeing. Production halted on that level. A foreman was dispatched, then an inspector, then a cleric. What followed is harder to reconstruct, because the official reports are gone. They were not burned in a fire or lost to war. They were removed deliberately. Catalog numbers skip. Pages were cut from bindings with careful blades. Someone wanted a clean absence rather than a messy destruction. Only one personal journal escaped the purge, tucked into the false bottom of a tool chest and forgotten when the mine was finally sealed. It belonged to a surveyor named Elias Core. Core was not a superstitious man. His early entries are dry, technical, obsessed with angles and pressures and soil composition. He writes about stress fractures in the supports and the slow creep of water through the rock. He complains about the smell of damp timber and the incompetence of local laborers. Then abruptly his tone changes. Depth, approximately 400 feet, he writes. Rock temperature inconsistent with charts. Warm to the touch, not geothermal, feels occupied. The word is underlined. Core describes the first cavity as a mistake, a hollow where there should not have been one. The walls were smooth, not jagged, as if shaped rather than broken. When the lantern light reached across it, the shadows behaved strangely, bending instead of stretching. That was where they found the thigh bone. It was not buried. It was embedded, fused into the surrounding stone as though the earth itself had grown around it. Chisel marks skittered uselessly across its surface. Iron rang against it with a sound more like struck glass than bone. When they finally freed a section, the miners refused to continue. Core notes the silence that followed. Men who sang to keep time with their swings would not speak. One dropped his pick and walked out without explanation. Another wept openly, unable to say why. The scale is wrong, Core writes that night. This is not a creature that died here. This is something that rests here. Soon after, the mine began to change. Tools went missing, not misplaced but removed. Lanterns extinguished themselves without wind. Sounds traveled where no tunnels existed. Footsteps pacing just beyond the rock face, slow and heavy, felt more than heard. Once, Core writes, he pressed his ear to the wall and felt a vibration that matched no known machinery. A pulse. The warmth increased as they dug deeper, but not evenly. Some passages were cold enough to frost breath, while others felt like the inside of a living body. The rock there was damp, almost soft, resisting drills in a way that suggested elasticity rather than hardness. One miner swore the walls moved when no one was looking. Core did not dismiss this outright. Instead, he recorded his own observation that the tunnel measurements no longer matched his earlier surveys. Distances subtly changed, straight lines bent. A corridor that should have ended at a support beam continued several feet beyond it, as though space itself had stretched. Then came the ribs. They emerged in sequence, each larger than the last, curving upward and vanishing back into the stone. The miners stood beneath them like ants beneath an aqueduct. Core estimates that if the structure belonged to a single body, that body would have been hundreds of feet long. No known anatomy supports this, he writes. And yet it is undeniably anatomical. The clergy sent to bless the site refused to descend past the second level. One muttered prayers continuously until he was brought back to the surface. Another demanded the mine be sealed immediately, declaring the place unfinished. When pressed for clarification, he could not explain what he meant. The final entries in Core's journal are written in a shaking hand. He describes a night when the vibrations grew strong enough to rattle nails loose from the supports. Dust fell like ash. Somewhere deep below, something shifted, slow and massive, producing a sound not unlike stone grinding against stone, except that it came in a rhythm. In sleep, Core writes, creatures turn. On the last page, a single sentence appears, written over and over until the ink tore the paper. Do not wake it. Shortly after, the mine was sealed. The official explanation cited structural instability and worker safety. A retaining wall was built. The entrance collapsed intentionally. The site was removed from future surveys, its name omitted from regional maps. Above ground, the land began to fail. Farmers complained that nothing would grow. Seeds sprouted, then withered. Roots twisted into knots as if encountering something resistant beneath the soil. Livestock refused to graze near the site, shying away from invisible boundaries. Birds avoided the air above it entirely. Over time, the buildings were abandoned. Roads fell into disuse. The area became a blank patch between towns, a place travelers hurried through without knowing why. Modern geologists have attempted to explain the anomaly. Some point to unusual mineral concentrations. Others suggest deep-seated seismic activity, microtremors too small to register on conventional equipment. A few propose that the warmth is residual industrial heat trapped underground. None can explain why instruments malfunction only within the affected zone, or why ground-penetrating radar returns impossible readings, vast shapes that resolve into nothing when analyzed. Those who stand there long enough report a sensation through their feet? Not an earthquake. A vibration so slow it barely qualifies as motion, like the rise and fall of breath, stretched across minutes instead of seconds. People describe an irrational urge to leave, coupled with a strange certainty that they are standing on something that knows they are there. At night, the ground sometimes hums. Not audibly, but internally. A low frequency felt in the bones, resonating in the chest. Animals that wander too close grow agitated, dogs whine. Horses rear. Insects vanish altogether as if the soil itself rejects them. No excavation has been authorized since the original sealing. The Journal of Elias Core ends in a museum archive catalogued as a curiosity. Scholars debate its authenticity, suggesting exaggeration, hysteria, or metaphor. The missing official reports are attributed to bureaucratic loss. And yet the land remains barren. No one can explain why. Sometimes, after heavy rain, faint depressions appear in the soil along curved impressions that vanish by morning. Sometimes, late at night, residents of nearby towns wake with the sensation that something enormous has shifted its weight far below them. They describe the same thought, unbidden and chilling in its clarity. The earth is not empty, it is occupied. And whatever lies beneath is not dead. It is only sleeping.